Hello, everybody. Now that you can hear me.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Out and Proud, an evening with the Triangle's elected officials. This event was organized by the UNC Institute of Politics. The IOP is a student organization dedicated to engaging and inspiring students to pursue careers in politics and public service. This panel is part of the IOP Speaker Series program. The Speaker Series brings knowledgeable individuals with a substantial background in the field of politics and public service to UNC Chapel Hill to engage in substantive conversations with students, faculty, and other members of the university community. Please be sure to check out the IOP's website and social media to learn more. My name's Danny Bowen, and I will be moderating this panel tonight. I'm a senior at UNC from Cocoa, Florida, studying statistics and analytics with minors in public policy and business administration. Currently, I'm serving as the Chief of Staff of Undergraduate Student Government here at UNC, but I'm also involved in the Sexuality and Gender Alliance as the Treasurer, formerly Co-President, and serving as a student board member of the Carolina Pride Alum Network. Joining us are our panelists. Allison Dahl is a Raleigh native. She graduated from USC with a degree in theater and speech and spent some time working in New York before coming back to North Carolina. She's currently serving in the North Carolina House in District 11. Next up, Mark Kleinschmidt, who attended UNC Law School, was a member of the Chapel Hill Town Council from 2001 to 2009, was the mayor from 2009 to 2015, and is currently serving as the Orange County Clerk of Superior Court. And last but not least, Vernetta Alston, a Durham native who studied political science at NC State before going on to law school at UNC, and then remained in Durham to practice law afterward. She served on the Durham City Council from 2017 to 2020, and now is in the North Carolina House in District 29. The first part of this panel will be prepared questions that I'll be asking our panelists, and the second part will be questions from the audience. So during the event, if you have any questions that come up, please submit them in the Q&A function, and we'll start taking those questions probably around 6 or whenever we get through all of ours. So without further ado, I'll get started. Our first question for y'all is, how did you first get interested in public service? And whoever wants to start can go ahead.
Okay, since I've probably been in it longer than Allison and Vernetta, I'll start. First, Danny, thank you and everybody else at the Institute of Politics for having us tonight. I think this is, it's just such a thrill to be able to reconnect with the larger UNC community. And I'm really excited to be part of an outreach program that you are continuing this semester in this really weird time that we're in. You know, I got interested in public service back when, I mean, it really traces back to high school. When I was a high school student, the state of North Carolina started a program that would pay for college if you agreed to be a teacher. And I was in the first class of teaching fellows at UNC back in 1988. You know, that program really instilled in me a real commitment to service. And that if we really believe, you know, to really believe in something, it needs to be reflected. You know, if you're gonna be honest about what you believe, it needs to be reflected in what you actually do, not just and not just in your profession, but in your day-to-day life. And teaching was my first step in that. And even when I went back to law school, I committed myself to working for indigent people, and eventually worked to represent people on death row with Vernetta for in the same, well, Vernetta ended up working in the same office I did a few years later. And my interest in working in an elected position really came from just a feeling that I wasn't still doing enough. You know, having been a teacher and having been a public service attorney, that there were still a lot of quality of life issues that affected the people who lived in the community that I was part of. And you know, you just couldn't shut me up. And so by the time I had spoken for so long about these issues I cared about, I realized that to take it to the next level, I needed to pursue elected office, which I was very fortunate in 2001 to have been elected to the Chapel Hill Town Council that started my career in elected office. I've just been following that path ever since. And it's about actualizing the things that I say I care about in my professional and public life. And I found that it's helped me do well. And I hope that it's helped my communities continue to improve as well.
Thank you, Mark.
So I'll go ahead, just jump right in. I am Allison Dahl, and I think the dinner table was where public service started. Both of my parents worked. One worked at NC State and one worked at Meredith College. And if those of you, when your parents work for a university or a college, you are of service to both of those places. And I then met school board members. And two names that are really important to me are Charlotte Martin, who I'm not sure if she's still around, and Rosa Gill, who I now serve with. And both of those people were on the school board. And I just thought that was awesome that women were on the school board. Because up until then, there hadn't been many women serving in public office. So I got interested in it and always wanted to be a part of it, but didn't know how to proceed per se. And then 2 years ago, Emily's List reached out due to my activity with Moms Demand Action and some other groups. And I was like, yes, I've always wanted to do this. So, okay. And here I am. I don't have a poli-sci background. I don't have a law degree. I'm just a regular old human, which is great because I see things in a totally different light. Because I've worked in the theater, I've worked with people with disabilities, I've worked all over the place. So it's just fun. And I'm excited to be here, and I want to thank the IOP and all of you guys for putting this together. I appreciate it.
And thank you so much for joining us. We're still not able to hear you, Vernetta.
That's because I muted my phone. That's probably why. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
good to go.
All right, terrific. Well, I'll echo my colleagues and thank you all for having us. It's nice to be with you all this evening. Feels really special to join Representative Dahl and Clerk Kleinschmidt, both of whom I have tremendous amounts of respect for. And yeah, I've been looking forward to this evening. I also saw someone in the chat note that Representative Dahl has the best hair in the General Assembly. I couldn't agree more. In terms of answering your question, I came to this aspect of my public service unexpectedly. I hadn't planned on entering politics. I am a lawyer by training, as you mentioned in my intro, and as Mark mentioned, I worked for the Center for Death Penalty Litigation and, spent my legal career doing criminal defense work and spent most of that time doing death penalty defense work. So, I kind of got recruited to run for the council in 2017 and thought to myself, well, at the very least, I know that I can bring kind of a commitment to progressive values and a social justice kind of framework to this work, even though I hadn't planned on doing anything like this and certainly didn't have any political experience. And I also ran in 2017, at a time when, I think we're all kind of reeling from the 2016 election cycle, at least at the national level. And so, I wanted to do more. I didn't know what more was. I didn't, necessarily know that this would all kind of work out the way that it has, but I wanted to do more. I wanted to challenge myself. So this opportunity afforded that. And I saw in Durham in particular, Durham's been growing, Triangle's been growing. And I saw Durham at the kind of a crossroads of, who are we going to be as we grow? As we grow and change and are attractive to more people and different types of people and, are struggling with things around housing insecurity and, kind of a changing character of our neighborhoods. Now is a great opportunity to create a progressive majority on our council and really kind of put our stakes in the ground about who we are and what our values are. So, just as a member of this community, being a part of that, the opportunity to be a part of that, felt really special. And also, I think, coming out of the 2016 cycle, I think we all helped to create an environment where kind of bold change felt really urgent, and were the kind of diverse representation that I and my colleagues bring now. There was a real desire for that. And I think we've all seized that opportunity, and hopefully those opportunities will continue to grow and flourish. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So this panel centers around a shared LGBTQ identity, but we all also come to the table with different identities. So I was wondering, how have your various identities impacted your experience?
I can start, y'all, if y'all want. It's such a great question, and sometimes it can feel hard to distill into a quick answer. But I'll say that I try to be mindful of kind of all of my various intersecting identities, and I think even without thinking about it, I operate with perhaps a better, or at least a fuller kind of understanding of the experiences and I guess just lived experience of folks who share any one of or all of my intersecting identities. And I try to be mindful of the fact that me being in this position and the experience that I can draw on because of who I am gives me and gives all of us power. And so I try not to take for granted the space that I occupy, not for myself, but for our community and communities. And so I try to use that to, I think like all of us, to help make our lives better, to help create more power, to kind of grow this even bigger than it already is. And kind of obviously create I want us to feel like we are not only just surviving and kind of existing, but that we are able to thrive. And so the way I try to think about that in practical terms is I try to bring my intersecting identities to kind of every decision-making point. So I don't just look at, my LGBTQ identity or my identity as a woman or as a Black woman, and just apply my experience to those issues. I try to bring my experience to, like when I was on council, to changes in our Parks and Recreation Department, or if we think about environmental racism and housing policies and clean energy policies and, transportation policies and the impacts that those decisions have on the communities that I, represent. And so I think being mindful about who I am and what I offer and the power that I bring to the table kind of at every conversation has the capacity to create real change and accountability to folks who can't identify in the ways that we do. So a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like to just underscore what Vernetta says about really kind of the responsibilities that come with service when you are reflecting a set of identities that haven't been at the table historically. One of the things that's always frustrated me, and I know that there's difference of opinions about this, and so Alston and Vernetta might think differently in some degree, but one of the things that frustrated me was one of the first openly LGBT elected officials in the state was that people would say to me, well, there's going to be a day when it doesn't matter. Or why should it matter that you're a gay man of an ambiguous ethnicity? And I said, my response has always been back to them, it matters. It has mattered, it matters now, and it's going to matter tomorrow. And I think it's our responsibilities to make sure that what matters about that is part of the conversation around every policy conversation, every policy issue. When I first became a town council member in 2001, only 4 other people in the LGBT community had ever been elected to public office in the state of North Carolina. And so when I became a council member, suddenly I was everybody's council member, whether you lived in Chapel Hill or not. So I would get phone calls from small towns in the mountains or down east from members of our larger community who would ask me advice for how they could make change in their community, and who felt handcuffed because of their identities and that they were somehow an other among those with whom they've lived and shared community. And coaching people in those situations and helping empower them in their own struggles. It's something that was important back when I first started. It's just as important in exactly the ways that Vernetta mentioned in her comments, and it's not going away anytime soon. And I think that the experience that we're having today, particularly around racial equity in America, broadly defined, it is exhibit A for the continued relevance of the need to continue to bring all who we are to public service, and and realize it does matter. It really matters.
It's really hard to add much to that. However, I will give you a different slant. When I started in the House, my goal was to make sure everybody understood that should be no fear involved in getting to know or serving with a lesbian, that I am just a human who happens to have a wife, and I proudly talk about my wife with lots of different people. And I will not forget the first time I said something about my wife, and I was chatting with a whole bunch of people, and a couple of them were like, well, looking around, and I was like, I got it, I'm here, and I just want to be there to let folks know that we're in the community. We are a part of the community, and we're not going anywhere. So we have to serve the entire community, not just part of the community. And I don't have, other than I'm just a white lesbian, but I also have a lot of empathy and understanding for a lot of different folks in the LGBTQ community, and constantly trying to lift those people up so that people understand that it's not just Allison, the gay lady who's married, but that we're a larger community, and we're here, and we are a part of this community, whether folks like it or not. And so, I just really get excited when I think about exposing people to a gay person, and they've never met or never known of somebody who is willing to say, yeah, I'm gay, and move on. Let's get to the policy. Let's get to spouse and spouse instead of, husband and wife. Let's move on from this and quit. Let's think about people as people instead of as units or whatever. So thanks.
Those were all great responses. And that's also the policy part of that is a really good lead into my next question. So in your current work, what does a day on the job look like? And what are your main policy priorities right now?
Well,
I stare at Zoom all day, but no, go ahead, Allison. I'll go after you.
No, I think certainly voting rights and ensuring that specifically trans people who may not match their legal ID have that opportunity to vote and feel protected and safe to vote, and constantly speaking up and saying, well, what if they don't match? And I use myself often because my ID is blonde haired. I said, what if they don't match? What if they're not the same? What if, they've totally redone and changed themselves? So we need to look at how we're going to address that. And fighting against voter ID is another piece of this. But also just letting people know that we as humans change, and so therefore we have to nothing should be imprinted in stone that is a policy about how we serve North Carolinians. So I just try to, and so making sure that trans people are included in all our decisions is a big point for me. And also making sure women are included. And making sure when I'm the only female in the room that I mention that there are women in the room and that we have to include women and other people that are not just white male or males. So.
I'll go ahead and chime in if that's all right. First of all, I want to thank Representative Dahl for what she's prioritizing, and as always, any way I can help them here. Those are obviously fabulous priorities and areas of policy that will probably weren't talked about several years ago. So I'm grateful to be a part of this cohort that cares about these issues, that's impacted by these issues, and that's working on them. Kind of what's a typical day like? Obviously right now it's a lot of, even though I was joking, it's a lot of sitting in front of the computer. But functionally, I'm probably the newest kid on the block over at the legislature, so I shouldn't say too much. But it's a lot of meetings. When we're in session, we're, in committee meetings or doing research about bills that are coming up for debate, either in committee or on the floor. Meet informally with colleagues and as much as we can right now, given that we're trying to remain socially distant. Then Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, we're on the floor, we debate bills, sometimes quickly, sometimes not at all, sometimes with a lot of advance notice, sometimes with none. And there's a lot of hurry up and waiting, which I learned a little bit about over these last few months. So far, we're not in session, and this is much of the case when I was on council as well. You have a lot of meetings, meet with folks, who are formally with interest groups or just constituents who care about an issue or are concerned about something that's happening in their own lives or the lives of someone they care about. And involves a lot of research, at least, from my perspective, and right now planning kind of for next year and whatever kind of environment we're in after the election. It's talking with constituents, returning a lot of email, probably nothing too novel, but right now I think we're all campaigning and, preparing for what lies ahead in 2021. I think there's obviously a lot of work to be done to that end. And, in terms of my legislative priorities, because of my background, criminal justice reform is a big component of my legislative priorities. I want to abolish the death penalty, something that Mark and I worked on in tandem or concurrently for many years. It's a system that's deeply, deeply broken. It's cruel in its administration. It's ineffective and perpetuates a history of racial violence that we need to move away from as quickly as possible. I think there are a lot of other opportunities kind of in the criminal legal system to expand diversionary tools, to compel the ethical treatment of folks who are incarcerated in our prisons. We've seen how horrifying many of those conditions are through COVID-19. And I think we need to think more seriously and invest more in sustainable reentry tools for residents and folks who are leaving prison and jail and returning to their communities. While I was in the council, I had a front row seat to the incredible amount of work and dedication that our city employees, at least in Durham, bring to their work. And I've built a strong commitment to, thinking about strong, sustainable, and effective infrastructure and helping our cities to, guarantee a sustainable future. And an area that I'm deeply, deeply interested in is transportation and kind of how transportation intersects with clean energy. I think we need serious reform in our transportation policy. I think we need to incentivize, multimodal transportation, greater mobility, mass transit infrastructure. I think it'll make for a more fiscally efficient future for the state of North Carolina and a more environmentally sustainable future for North Carolina, and that obviously could have impacts beyond our state borders. I housing is something that, you know, has been a huge issue for me since I served at the local level. And COVID-19 has, you know, only highlighted the ways that our government is really failing so many of our residents who are struggling with housing insecurity. And I think the state can just do more to create safe, accessible, and affordable housing, and, you know, really shift the culture around housing and treat housing like a basic human right, which it is. And obviously, kind of in tandem with what Representative Dahl mentioned, you know, I want to do everything that I can to lend my voice to, you know, our continued fight for LGBTQ equality and inclusion, whether that's through, you know, a kind of deeper and more comprehensive non-discrimination protections, or in every facet of our lives. So that's always at the top of my mind. Thanks.
My day job, for the first time, I've been in elected office for almost 20 years. My day job now is my elected position, which is not the way it was when I was mayor and on the council. But it's really brought together the two great passions in my life, public service and access to justice. And so, you know, I'm in a position now where I've gone to work every day since March 13th. And working hard to make sure that the doors to the courthouse remain open and accessible to people. People haven't stopped getting into disputes. People haven't stopped being victims of crime. Domestic violence has not stopped. Right now, we're on the cusp of what we imagine to be a tidal wave of evictions and foreclosures as the economic impacts of the COVID-19 experience now start, you know, permeating our ability to access housing, and you know, it really underscores the importance of what Vernetta was talking about. And you know, I'm part of a team of people in our courthouse, and I'm very fortunate in Orange County that we have a district attorney, a public defender, and a set of judges in both the district court and in the Superior Court who are working together as a team. And I tell you that not every county is as close and working in tandem in the same ways that Orange is. And I'm really, really proud of them and us and the work that we're doing to make sure that access to justice it continues to be available to people, even though our world is now upside down. We have, you know, the housing crisis, the impending housing crisis, the severity of which cannot be overstated. There are landlords now who have not received rent payments in 6 months. That means that tenants are likely to be out of a home at the end of the year. Fortunately, we have a series of layered moratoriums in place that are preventing most, but not all, evictions. There are lenders out there, mortgage lenders, who've not received a mortgage payment in the same amount of time. Mortgages are going into default. Again, there's a series of overlaying moratoriums in place, but those are all going to expire sooner than later. And as the clerk of Superior Court, one of the things that people often don't realize is that I'm also a member of the judiciary, and I am the judge of special proceedings that includes foreclosures. And while I can't, and I have to commit myself to reviewing each of these cases individually and entering orders when the evidence requires it. But before that avalanche happens, I'm telling you, I'm being an advocate on the policy side to make sure that this housing crisis doesn't extend any, at least hopefully it doesn't get any worse than it appears that it's going to be, and trying to bring together the various moving parts, which local housing authorities, financial assistance is both coming from the state and the federal government, in order to make sure that people's mortgages are getting paid and that rents can get paid, and to make sure that those resources are available and that people know about them. And so I've been working hard on that. If you visit the Orange County Courthouse Facebook page or our new website, you'll see, you know, like links, and these are things that I've been working on to try to get that information out there to those resources. And if there's a message I have for anybody who's experiencing that, is that there is help available. And there are probably very few more demoralizing moments in a person's life when they realize they're having difficulty maintaining a roof over their heads. And that demoralization can be paralyzing. And if you can get past the paralyzing impact of that and reach out, the resources are available right now. And I pray that you will take advantage of them and avail yourself of the resources your local community has, and to protect yourself and your families. And that's a message that I'm telling everyone who will listen to me.
Thank you all. We've about reached the halfway point of prepared questions. I don't have any questions in the Q&A function, but just a reminder for everyone in the audience that if you do have questions, whether they're directed at all of our panelists or it's a follow-up question on something specific, please feel free to submit those to the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Otherwise, I do have a few more questions prepared that I'll continue to present to our panelists. But if anything comes up in the Q&A, I'll ask them that as well. So my last planned question is, what advice do you have for young people, especially LGBTQ young people who are interested in getting involved in politics?
Run for office. You will never learn what you think you need to know unless you run for office. And I know that it's, I'm sitting here, I ran my first race, I was successful, I got into the House, and I realized that not all races are that way. And I would also reach out to LGBT folks that are in office, talk to them about their story. I would run for office. I would work on campaigns. I would volunteer for campaigns. And, unfortunately, the volunteer jobs are putting out signs and dropping lit, or now dropping lit in COVID, making phone calls. Probably the hardest thing about being an elected official is, due to the way we finance things, is constantly calling people and asking them for money. So if you get comfortable with calling people and asking them to vote, it's a whole lot easier to break over. I did a lot of fundraising in theater, because that's another thing that you have to beg for to get paid there. So for me, fundraising was okay. But also just being willing to go involve yourself in HRC, in, help me, Mark. It's the other group that
Equality? Equality NC?
Mayor
Victory Foundation?
Parker. What?
The Victory Fund and Victory Foundation.
Victory Fund. All of those people have virtual phone banking, have all sorts of things you can get involved with. And just talking to people. Making sure that, I know that I look like I'm calm, cool, and collected, but I'm not when I'm talking to strangers. I'm terrified. So I have to figure out a way to mask that so that I can walk into a room and go, "Hi, it's so good to meet you." So you have to face a lot of your fears too, and be ready for that. It's not, be ready to face your fears, and make sure you have somebody you can confide in who's not going to be judgmental. And that may be an elected official, that may be somebody you don't even know, but try it. Just try it. Don't think you're not qualified enough. One of the things that held me back so long was because I didn't have a law degree. I didn't have experience. I didn't have this. But I have been really successful in the last 2 years. I've gotten 2 bills that have passed the House floor, and 1 bill was a tie. So, you never know what you can do. So just reach for the stars and do it. And you're welcome to email me and ask me questions.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, I think to young folks who are interested in kind of entering politics, just know that you can and you should guide the direction of your community. Like, that power is yours. And we need you. I think you're essential to our work, to the work that you want to do, and kind of our growth in our community and the voice that we have. So yeah, do it. Ask, as Allison said, ask questions. You can call any of us. Yeah, like I said, I hadn't planned on entering politics, and so I kind of started off the first few months before I announced. I sat down with a lot of people and asked a lot of very basic questions. And so yeah, and volunteer, and everything that Allison's mentioned, you should also do.
Whenever young people ask me how to get started in politics, the first thing I often say, though, is to focus on an issue that's important to you and go to work to make change on that issue. So if it's about voter ID, or if it's about getting a stop sign put up on your street corner, being able to engage in that kind of experience of creating change is, I think, one of the best ways to prepare for service in an elected position. Both Alston and Vernetta spent many years working on issues that they cared about before they, said, "Hey, now it's my turn to be, the policy maker." Get involved in those issues. I think that lends a lot of credibility when you finally decide you're going to become a candidate, because you will have practiced articulating policy positions. You'll know how to sift through the BS and get right to the core of an issue much more effectively than people who literally are just pulled off the street. And I know that Allison and I work with a lot of people who seem like they were just pulled off the street and sent into the General Assembly. I mean, honestly, that's what the House looked like after the 2010 election. I mean, people who didn't advocate for issues, they didn't no experience making any change in their communities, and a wave happened and they were swept in, and then we were stuck with it. So that's what happens when you get people who don't care about anything in the position to make policy. And you're hearing from some people in our General Assembly right here tonight who spent their time making those changes and advocating for change, and then they knew what they were going to do when they got into their office. And that's why you can't underestimate Representative Dahl. Just because she's been there for one term, she's going to end up having 20. We all know it. And anybody, I first met Vernetta when she just started practicing law, and I tell you, anybody who underestimated her just because she had just started something, that was the first and biggest mistake they ever made. And I think it's largely because the commitment to creating change and being focused on real issues and not just about yourself. We see all these false, fake people running for office, and it's all about them. It's not about the issues. If you make it about the issues, you can make that change. And maybe it doesn't mean you go into elected office yourself, but you can become an influential player in politics without being the office holder. There's room for so many people in the policy arena.
This next question is from Isabel, and it says, when Pete Buttigieg ran in the Democratic presidential race, I heard a lot of rhetoric regarding whether or not America is ready for a gay president. Do you feel like this narrative influenced his chance of success? And this is a heavy question, so take your time.
I think that it did, in the same respect that when Geraldine Ferraro ran for vice president with whoever that was. I don't remember him. I remember her. But
Mondale,
yes. Are we ready for a woman? What if she does this? What if she does that? What if this happens? I mean, I think that, unfortunately, I think that these United States are not used to looking at politicians who are not white males, and sometimes black males. But, you know, I think that, yeah, it probably did. And probably had he not come out or had nobody known, I don't know what would have happened. But we are, you know, as American people, we should constantly embrace that we have to change if we want to move forward. And, you know, my other thought is the rhetoric was primarily in the news, because it wasn't, nobody asked me if I thought that we could have a gay president, because I would have been like, yeah, move on. So, you know, it probably did, but how would we know at this point?
Yeah, I was all in for Pete. I'd known Pete for many years. We both were mayors of ACC cities. That's what we can certainly call South Bend an ACC city this year. You know, so I kind of knew that he was the real deal long before he ever ran for president. But you know, I kind of reflect back on my early days running for office and the few people who I knew in office. You know, my political hero is Joe Herzenberg, who maybe many of you may not know, but he was the first openly LGBT person elected to public office in the whole South. And it was as a council member in the town Chapel Hill. And I was fortunate enough to have met him when I was in college, and he was a real mentor of mine. You know, we would talk about being out and gay in the earliest days. It was kind of like, at least in a community like Chapel Hill, it was kind of a wash, because there of course were people who absolutely did not want a queer in office, period. And that was the end of the conversation with them, which is probably why he lost his first race for town council. But then eventually he became like a talking dog, right? You know, it was like, what? He can speak intelligently about issues. It's not just about being, you know, a gay person. And it kind of goes back to what I mentioned before about being able to talk about issues and being authentic about why you're running for office. And I think Pete really did that so well. You know, I think he challenged people's ideas about what it means to be an LGBTQ person in America, because even those who accept whatever that means, members of our community, you know, living amongst them, it's still a leap for many of them to see us in leadership positions. And I think he moved the ball forward here by demonstrating, you know, like Joe would say, you know, he's more than just that, but he's also that. And you can carry, you know, the articulate, well-informed, brilliant person forward, you know, as a potential candidate, and he can also be a gay man. You know, it's just, and that I think shocked a lot of people. I think, you know, I doubt he was ever going to win, but the advances he did for our community by running and being a viable candidate for as long as he did, and he won Iowa, the end. You know, I mean, that was huge. I think he's changed the face of politics for the LGBTQ people forever, in similar ways that Geraldine Ferraro did, even in her losing effort, did for women at the national level. Now, it may take 30 years before we finally have somebody there, but I hope it'll go more quickly than that. Now, what do you think, Vernetta?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think, yeah, I mean, again, kind of as Representative Dahl said, I'm sure it played a role, you know, how much, to what degree, you know, in relation to, you know, kind of other reasons that voters and pundits were cynical about Mayor Pete, you know, it's hard to know, but I'm certain it played a role. And, you know, I believe, Mark, that, you know, Pete's presidential candidacy, you know, I hope really helped our community, and in particular the community of LGBTQ electeds and future electeds. And, you know, I think it's up to us to, you know, kind of use the momentum that Pete created and helped to influence to continue our work and create a deeper bench and a strong pipeline of LGBTQ folks in this work. So,
because President Alston is inevitable, we know that.
No thanks. Don't wish that on me.
Yeah, you said no thanks when you were being recruited for council too, but yeah.
Yeah. Details.
You know, and I want to add one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and this is just for me, it was a bigger deal that I had pink hair than it was that I was gay. So, in that respect, when we look at Wake County and we look at how our cities are growing, that was incredibly refreshing. That, and it was, you know, that more people complained to me about my hair than ever said. I don't ever remember anybody saying anything about my being gay or the fact that my wife came with me to lots and lots of events. So that gives me a whole lot of hope that we're further along than we think we might be. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Our next question is, what has been your proudest achievement so far while in office?
Well, I haven't been here that long. Yeah, on the legislative side, I think, practically speaking, I think being a part of the pandemic response bill, which, left a lot of work to be done, but what was a really impressive piece of legislation that, folks like Representative Bell, I wasn't on any of the COVID committees, but you all worked so fast, to create a really strong bill that folks needed, so urgently back in April and May. So being a part of that work was, I think obviously something I'll remember forever. I think being a part of a group of Democrats that upheld several vetoes of our governor was, represented really important political statements. But, I got to be a part of the work that folks like Representative Dahl did to break the supermajority in 2018. And so to kind of see that happen and be a part of that and be able to cast votes along with this group of people was pretty great. And also, I came into office unexpectedly in April, and when my predecessor, Representative Marianne Black, passed away in March, and towards the end of the session, we had the opportunity to honor her on the floor. So kind of honoring her and respecting her legacy, and continuing her work and the values we shared is really important to me. So being able to do that felt really special. Yeah.
Mark, I was gonna let you go ahead, but I'll take the reins. So this is gonna sound really strange, but my tie vote on the floor when I proposed that we move to all paper ballots throughout the state of North Carolina. That and the voting law, the voting bill for, because can you tell I really like voting rights? The election bill, the bipartisan election bill that helped people vote absentee and we gave other support to the State Board of Elections and the County Board. But that tie was just fascinating, because there were people on both sides who said no, and it was fascinating to see who was interested in it. And I've done a whole lot of work with paper ballots as opposed to electronic machines, and that's a whole nother story. But it was just really, I was like, all right, I can do this. So that was really exciting for me.
When I was mayor, I led a new community visioning exercise that created a new comprehensive plan for the city. I know this is really wonky, but those things are usually edited. Vernetta's like, yeah, look, comprehensive plans. Usually those are done by like a small group of people that then present something to a council, and then it gets passed, and then it sets rules for like a decade or so. And back in the Great Recession, I just rejected that old model of comprehensive planning, and I decided, to lead an effort that would get a lot of people involved in it. And we got almost 10,000 people involved in helping create rules for how their community was going to grow. And as a former civics teacher, it just made my heart explode. I was like, oh my God, people are participating in local government. It's just, and to this day, I think that's probably my biggest achievement. But and then in my current position as the clerk, I think it just has to be this response to COVID-19. Court does not work the way it did 6 months ago. And we changed it entirely and never let it stop while we were making the changes. So it was literally, we were fixing a plane as it was flying in midair and trying to keep it from crashing. And we're still in the air. So, I think as long as we're flying, that's probably will be the achievement of my public service.
The point about the comprehensive planning and participation in local government is a really good transition to our next question, specifically for you, Mark, and also Vernetta, about why did you choose to become involved in local government specifically?
For me, I was a law student in the late 90s. And if anybody's familiar with Chapel Hill, the law school is on Ridge Road, and it ends up intersecting with Country Club Road. And that's the path that you go to get to the bus stop. And when I was in law school, the School of Government, which is right next door to the law school, was under construction, a huge renovation. So you couldn't cut through that space to get to the bus stop. So you had to walk up Ridge Road, turn on Country Club, and come all the way around. There were no sidewalks and no crosswalks. And there was a huge student parking lot at the end of Country Club, and cars would just race up there. And then every day, law students would leave school and take their life in their hands to get to the bus. And, a lot of people, I used to joke, a lot of people, you said, they're just law students. Who cares? But they're going to be lawyers. What's so bad about that? But I just thought it was ridiculous. And so I went to the town and said, you guys need to put in sidewalks. And the town said, oh, no, that's a campus issue, because you're right there on the campus side. And so the campus said, oh, no, that's a town issue. So there was this paralysis around pedestrian infrastructure, right where the town and gown met. And that just pissed me off. And so, we got a petition together, we went to the council, we got the university, and now if you go walk through that space, you will walk on a sidewalk, and there are plenty of crosswalks, and it's nicely done up. And that was my first, foray into local government. I was like, wow, you can really make change if you just, sit around and complain all the time about, the sidewalk or traffic, and it's never going to change. And it only takes that much effort to organize some people and make some change. And so once I realized that, what I'd been telling students when I was a civics teacher was real, you can make a difference in your community. And I just did it right there. It was just that just took off from there.
Yeah, and I'll say, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, I hadn't planned on running for office, but I kind of recognized, just as a community member and as someone who was just increasingly involved in Durham, kind of where we were a few years ago, which was a great place. Durham was growing and thriving and changing in some really exciting and dynamic ways. And I knew that myself and a lot of folks like me, wanted to make sure that, aspects of Durham's history and, what I think we view as, in Durham's character, which includes taking care of vulnerable people, making sure that, we're always prioritizing folks who are housing insecure, making sure that we're always thinking about communities of color and kind of positioning them in a place where they are at the table, thinking about economic opportunities for you know, particularly African Americans, but folks of color, you know, making sure that those conversations and that equity and the kind of community participation that Mark has done so much work on are kind of at the forefront of policymaking really appeal to me. Now I'll say, and I'm going to try not to get too excited about this, once I got to the city and started working, you know, I really gained an appreciation for the proximity that we have with constituents, you know, just being accessible to people and having just like real true personal relationships with the people that we serve. But also I got, you know, a crash course in how amazing municipal government is. You know, like when I talk to kids about municipal government, I would often start by saying, you know, have you walked on a sidewalk today? Have you used water from a faucet today? You know, have you washed your teeth? Have you brushed your teeth? Did you drink water from a water fountain? Have you been to a park? You know, and I'd say this is your local government at work. And what being on city council taught me is that there are thousands of heroes, people who don't care about political recognition, who don't want their faces on yard signs, who just care a lot about clean water. They care a lot about sidewalks. They care a lot about kind of solid waste, like policy. They care a lot about roads, and they're really good at it, and they work every day to make sure that you have clean water to drink, that your trash gets picked up, that your roads don't have potholes, that your kids have parks to play in. And fortunately, in Durham, and I'm sure in a lot of cities like it, we get to take those things for granted. And there are a lot of places in this country and around the world where that's not the case. And that's because of really hardworking, amazing people at the city. So anyway, I am a huge cheerleader for city staff because without them, so many of our basic needs would be much harder to attain. And so being a part of that, it felt like a real honor.
Thank you all. That brings us, unfortunately, to the end of our time. This went by really fast for me. I don't know about y'all, but I really appreciate you coming and speaking to us, and also really appreciate the Institute of Politics for organizing this event. And also to everyone who is in attendance, thank you for joining, and be sure to follow the IOP on social media for future events.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us again.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.